I
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, I love it. She's quite aggressive, that lady, isn't she?
She is a bit aggressive. She is a bit, to be honest.
So thank you, everyone, for coming today to this talk. I'm going to be spending some time today telling you about how we can combat negative self-talk and also start to cultivate some more self-compassion, which is a very important part of that. So thank you for choosing to give up your Monday evenings or part of it to come and be here. I'm really excited to talk to you about this topic. It's my first time speaking to the Frollo community, and I've got a really good friend who found Frollo probably about 3 years ago now, and she speaks very highly, so it's a real privilege to be here speaking with you all tonight. Thank you again for coming. I'll share a little secret with you that this is my first webinar in a really long time. I came back from maternity leave in September, so there are some nerves tonight, but I'm sharing that in the knowledge that I know we're going to be gentle with each other, and hopefully by the end of this session you'll all be that bit more gentle with yourselves as well. So I'll just kick off by telling you a bit more about me, sharing a few personal stories, and just so you know who you're going to be spending your next hour or so with. So I'm Kate. I'm a mum of two. I've got a boy who's 6 and a little girl who's almost 20 months and keeping us very much on our toes. And in between those two, I changed careers. So I had a 12-year career in media, working in media and advertising agencies. And then in 2020, I left that to become a coach, which on the face of it sounds like a really positive, empowering, go after the career you want story. But actually, it was off the back of probably one of the hardest years of my life. So obviously there was little matter of a pandemic, just to kind of throw a curveball, but also right at the start of that, I was pushed to burnout at work and signed off for a period. And then during the beginning of that period, had the call from my dad to say that my mum's cancer was getting to end of life and that it was time to come home and say goodbye to her. So in that summer, you know, I kind of in the aftermath of all of that, I found this clarity and courage to make the changes that I wanted from my life. But I just wondered why it took me to get to breaking point before I did that. So now as a coach, I work predominantly with women, but women who are feeling lost, stuck, overwhelmed, and hopefully at the point before they get to breaking point, helping them to regain clarity and confidence and control in their lives, personal or professional. And I do that so that they can move forward with purpose, direction, and self-compassion. And it's the self-compassion piece that I feel is increasingly important. And it's also effective because the kinder we are to ourselves, the more resilient we are, the better we feel, and the better we do. And the kinder we are if we fail, and the quicker we pick ourselves up again. And, you know, I think my personal journey, which even as a coach, that word makes me cringe a little bit, but my personal journey with self-compassion is that I identify as a perfectionist. You know, it's something I'm working on, but, you know, I've always got that perfectionist streak. And it was actually in that summer that I lost my mum. You know, she's literally on her deathbed. And one of the things she said to me was, if I had one wish for you, darling, it would be that you wouldn't be so hard on yourself. And that was quite a wake-up call. And I would say, like, the last couple of years with the change in careers, being new in something again, building a business for the first time. You know, I've never been self-employed until I became a coach in 2020, and then having a pregnancy and maternity leave in the middle of that to juggle as well. I have progressively been learning to be kinder to myself. And that's what I would love to share with you all this evening. So here's the plan, so you know what to expect. I'm going to start with a bit of time looking at what negative self-talk is and why it matters that we tackle it, and also why it happens. And then I'm going to be sharing 5 steps and tools to help us combat that negative self-talk, and also create frameworks for more encouraging, positive, nurturing inner voice for ourselves. So a few bits of housekeeping. Like Susanna said, please do comment in the chat box. I haven't got enough space on my screen to look at it as well, so but I'm not ignoring you. But yeah, please do comment, and Susanna will jump in if there's anything kind of pressing. There are a couple of moments of light interaction just to kind of prime you for that, but just to reassure you, no one's under the spotlight at any point, and it's only by invitation. So only if you feel comfortable to share. And if we get tumbleweed in those moments, you know what, we'll just move on swiftly. It's absolutely fine. But also, this is your time tonight, and thank you again for choosing to log on with me tonight in your evening. So I just love to invite you to just mentally put down anything that has distracted you or kind of shaken you today, shake off the day, and just sit back and relax. Let me do the work for a while, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of tonight. I might swear at a couple of points as well, so sorry if I do slip up and do that, but I'm hoping most of the kids are in bed, and so just apologies for I hope I don't offend anyone in the process of that. So now we've broken the ice, I'd really love to start by painting a bit more of a picture of what negative self-talk looks like. So I'd like to invite you now to just reflect on this question. So what have you said to yourself today that was mean, negative, or critical? So, you know, if you want to keep that private, and you might want to, so feel maybe you want to have a moment now to just write that down and capture some of those thoughts. But for anyone who's brave enough, I'm also would love to try and create a bit of a mood board here, just to show us what negative self-talk can look like. So if you want to, feel free to kind of take yourself off mute and just speak out into the space. I need no context whatsoever of why you're saying these things to yourself, just the phrase, what have you said to yourself today that feels negative, mean, or critical? Either drop it in the chat box and Susanna can shout out, or take yourself off mute and we'll see what we've got. Just in the interest of sharing, I'll start with mine. So I'm turning 40 on Thursday, so I've been doing a lot of hang on, let's get a better colour that's a bit, there we go. Looking old and tired. That has been one last week.
There's one on the chat box that says, I'm a shitty, insignificant mother.
Yeah.
I'll share when I got very angry today at my younger daughter because she wasn't listening.
Yeah.
Very angry. And I thought I could have done better, but I didn't.
I could have done better. Yeah.
And there was another one here. I should have done more with my day to day.
Yeah.
And then someone else has put rubbish at public speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Quite a range. Any more for any more?
Well, yeah, one more just popped up. I feel invisible in work meetings. And then another one is, sorry, I've got an ex who's a narcissist and makes my life very upsetting.
Yeah.
So quite a mix really there, Kate, isn't it?
Now you're going to have to try and spell narcissist, and then there's me going, I can't spell narcissist. And
we know what you mean, don't we? It's all good.
Yeah.
I find that when I make a mistake at work, especially, something that comes to mind quite often is I'm so silly, I'm so stupid. And I just can't believe, this is a big put down. And, but it comes almost natural. Like when I do something that's a mistake, I just think that, and I think that's awful, really. But I do.
Yeah. I don't think you're the only one, Rosa. Exactly. Someone else said as well that I just don't feel like I'm doing enough. I'm not enough.
Yeah, the doing enough, being enough thing, especially in our modern society, and for single parents, it's unacceptably high standards, isn't it? Yeah. So is that enough to get us all in the mood for how?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean,
cool.
as we can see there, you know, negative self-talk can be really cruel. It's that can be fairly constant inner voice that's telling us that we're not good enough, we can't succeed, we're unlovable, we're bad parents, we're doing everything wrong. But it's also really common. So a study by the National Science Foundation found that we produce up to 50,000 thoughts a day, and a staggering 70 to 80% of those are negative. So if we do the maths on that, up to 80%, that's 40,000 potential negative thoughts a day that are running through our heads. And just to add salt in the wound to that, 95% of those are thought to be repetitive. So not only are we saying some really shitty things to ourselves, but we're also saying quite a lot of the same negative things. And of course, this is going to have an impact on us, right? So at best case scenario is that it's counterproductive, that we just don't do as much as we feel that we could do, or we hold ourselves back from doing what we would want to do by telling us that we're, you know, can't do it, for example. But at worst, it can have a really profound impact on our mental health and our well-being. And it can lead to self-esteem, decreased self-esteem, increased stress, anxiety, depression. You know, these are really big impacts of negative self-talk. But it also kind of impacts our lives on the outside. So it's not just about being in our heads, it also influences our behavior and our decisions, because according to CBT theory, or cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a connection between our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So how we think impacts how we feel, and how we feel impacts how we behave and the actions that we choose to do. And then those actions reinforce those thoughts, and then we end up in this cycle. So if we want to change something about this, and we want to make something more positive, we need to break that cycle. And one of the ways can be to change those thoughts, because if we can change our thoughts, that can help us feel differently about ourselves, feel emotionally different. And that gives us the room to choose different actions and to behave differently. And that gets us different results. And those different results reinforce that new, more positive thought, and a better cycle continues. So this is bigger than just being kind to yourself in your head. This actually has the potential to have a positive, empowering impact on your life and how you show up in the world and how you interact with others and the relationships that you have. And I think as parents, it also has implications for our kids, because they pick up on so much more than we realise. And they might not be able to read our minds, and they don't see us at work, but they notice how we talk to ourselves and how we act. And I don't say that to make any of us feel guilty, because we've got enough on our plates as parents, but just to kind of highlight that there's a wider positive impact to this than you know, yourself. And you know, you can be helping to model better self-esteem and better resilience for our children as well, if we can train ourselves to talk kinder to us. But how do we do it? So the first step is, I know this often can be a bit of a cliche, but it's awareness. So first, we do need to notice when we're talking unkindly to ourselves, because as we've seen, a lot of these thoughts are... Oh, is that a question or...
Sorry.
So a lot of these thoughts are automatic or repetitive, and they take up the majority of our thoughts. So that can make it really difficult to catch the negative ones, right? I guess sometimes we might get a wake-up call from someone else, or a bit of tough love. So I had a similar story to you, Susanna, actually, for a few weeks ago. Was just having one of those mornings where I just couldn't get my son out of the house for school, and everything was just no. And like my last retort to him was like, oh, well, I guess I'm such a horrible mummy for trying to get you to school on time. Yeah, proud parenting moment. But yeah, I mean, I guess I thought I was just being sarcastic, but there was an underlying unkind way I was talking to myself there, because I was feeling like a failure for the arguments and the tension and then not getting him out of school on time. But his reaction really took me aback. So he stopped, got really cross with me, and I was like, oh God, here we go. And he was like, Mummy, don't talk to yourself like that. You're not a horrible mummy. When you call yourself that, all you're doing is learning me to be mean to myself. And I was like, I mean, he's 6, right? And I was like, oh my God. So that was a wake up call that morning to bring my attention to the fact that I was saying something about myself and referring to myself in a derogatory way, right? And having that awareness helped me to choose to behave differently, and the rest of the morning went much more smoothly. But like I said, if we're having a lot of negative thoughts and a lot are unconscious, then it can be really difficult to do that for ourselves. So here are just a few ways that you can start to notice. So one is to actually pay attention to your emotions, so how you're feeling. So as we've seen through the CBT model, there's a connection between your thoughts and your feelings. So it might be easier to notice if you're feeling particularly down or irritated or angry or useless or inferior, and use that emotion as the red flag to say, oh, okay, what am I actually saying to myself in this moment? You know, some people might find it easier to tune into your body if you're quite good at being connected to your body. So if there's any changes in your breathing or tension in your body. So I don't know if you ever have it, sometimes you notice you haven't taken a deep breath in a long while and you're like holding your breath. It might be that you can go, okay, I'm holding my breath. Why am I holding my breath? What am I saying? What was I thinking about? What was I saying to myself? Am I anxious about something? What is it that I'm anxious about? Or, you know, if your shoulders are up near your ears, like, is there something that's causing that tension? So yeah, paying attention to how you're feeling. Or it might be that you create more kind of intentional moments during your day to check in with yourself. So perhaps it's setting a reminder on your phone if you're that kind of person, or it might be that you kind of punctuate your day with, you know, whenever I am waiting for the kettle to boil or I pop to the toilet, I'm just gonna take a moment and ask myself, how am I feeling? What have I been saying to myself so far today? And writing it down can help, just using your notes app on your phone. So yeah, having a bit more of an intentionality again. Or it might be noticing patterns. So you might find that there are certain situations or times or people where, I don't know, there's a sense of dread, or you know that you're not going to feel good when that comes up. So, you know, perhaps it's the beginning of the weekend or a Sunday night, or perhaps it's when you're around a certain person you feel inferior. Like if you start to, you might have awareness around that situation, your feelings, but if you could go that one step further and start to pay attention in those moments, what are you saying to yourself? And just bringing some more conscious awareness to that. Then once you have started to kind of get an awareness around what it is you're saying, the next step is about acceptance. And this isn't acceptance in terms of just agreeing with that thought. It's more a sense that in order to tackle it and process it and change it into something more positive, we do need to first acknowledge it. Because if we shut it out and resist it, we're effectively just putting our head in the sand and not dealing with the problem. So to do this, it can help to understand the purpose behind the negative self-talk, and then that helps us approach it with a bit more compassionate curiosity, because negative self-talk at the end of the day, even though it sounds counterintuitive, it's actually a form of self-defense. Effectively, it's trying to keep you safe. So humans have a natural negativity bias, and that, you know, as the theory goes, has evolutionary roots, because our distant ancestors, staying alert to potential dangers helped them to survive. And that could be, you know, fear of the dark, or, you know, environmental things, but it does also apply to social settings. So for example, we had a much better chance of survival if we were fitting in, and if we were likable, and if people were going to be accepting us, and then we're part of a tribe. But if we're rejected or not liked or outcast, then that's you know, was detrimental to our survival. So it's rooted in the most distant way in trying to keep us safe. But the problem is that that doesn't apply nowadays, and it can actually just become a problem for us. So once we kind of know this and look at negative self-talk through this lens, I'd encourage you to start to try and befriend it. So if you can see it almost as a really overly cautious, overprotective friend who's trying to keep you safe and trying to keep you close, but they're just going about it all wrong and they're being real dicks while they're doing it. Right, sorry, I did tell you about the swearing. So yeah, even just knowing this can help you nurture a more compassionate kind of approach for yourself, where you can kind of say, okay, I hear you, but I know what you're trying to do, but that's not very helpful and I'm not going to listen. It can even help to characterize it. So you might want to give it a name. I don't know if anyone's heard of Mo Gaudat. He's been on a few podcasts before. He's an ex-Google executive who wrote a book about being happy. And he calls his negative inner voice Becky, because there was a girl in his school who was really irritating called Becky. So then he kind of pictures this Becky. I'm really sorry if anyone called Becky's here or your kids called Becky. It's absolutely, that's Mo's experience, not mine. But yeah, so then that gives, if you personify that voice as something separate from you, that you can put a bit of fire and kind of reject it a little bit, then that can help to detach you from that thought. Because once you kind of recognize that, okay, I know what you're saying and I've started to understand what you're saying, and I know that you're trying to help me, but it's just really misguided, then this third step is about hitting the big red bullshit button, because then we can start to question and tackle what that thought is saying to us. So part of this is recognizing that thoughts are just thoughts. They are not facts. They are not facts. And that can actually, as simple as that sounds, be really hard to remember when so many of our thoughts are unconscious and repetitive. We're just kind of taking them on board and we're not questioning them. We're just like, oh yeah, I'm stupid, I'm silly, I'm a bad parent, da, 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 and it's seeping into us, right? But if we were to compare our thoughts to, say, like a rolling news feed in like Facebook, your social media platform of choice, you know, we are being presented with snapshots and opinions and assumptions and inherited stories all the time. And within that realm of social media, we know that not all of that is going to be true, but we also know it's impossible to fact check everything. You know, so it's the same for our own thoughts. If it's unhelpful, we shouldn't assume that it's a correct thing that's being said to us. And that also kind of helps us to see that we are not our thoughts. If we can observe our thoughts as separate to us, so anyone who's dabbled in mindfulness practices before, you know, there's a really lovely analogy I think that Headspace uses, but if our thoughts, if you imagine them as clouds and we are watching them pass by, we are not those clouds. Those clouds are separate to us, but we can witness them, we're experiencing them. Sometimes they might, you know, pass through us, and some are darker than others, but we are not those thoughts. And creating that space enables us to be more curious and objective about what that self-talk is actually saying, rather than taking it on board and making it a part of us. Because at the end of the day, it's all a story. We're all telling ourselves heavily edited stories, but we're doing it through our own lenses and filters and assumptions and shortcuts that we've built up over our own very individual experiences and lives. And that's why it's going to be completely different for every single one of us. And it's necessary for us to have those shortcuts, because our brains literally can't reprocess every piece of information that's presented to us. So we need to have these shortcuts. We need to go, okay, this equals that. This is my story. Okay, good. And a lot of the time that's absolutely fine. But if it's something that is negative, or it's wrong, or it's holding you back, or it's negatively impacting you in any way, then we have the opportunity to retell that story and we rewire that message. So, you know, if we're to kind of stick with the social media analogy for a minute, as we've seen, if anyone's on TikTok and they've used bold glamour, like, maybe don't, because then when it comes off, it's really depressing. But yeah, I mean, filters can sometimes look really nice and be very convincing, but that doesn't mean that they're true. And I mean, let's be honest, sometimes it's nice to use filters in the short term. Sometimes it's kind of comforting. It's kind of our mental junk food. We can tell ourselves we can stay in our comfort zones. But there's quite a few mental filters or thinking distortions that are unhelpful. So these are just a few, but yeah, so distortions and thinking distortions, if we look at this as kind of bending or warping the information and the evidence that we're getting to tell a story that we think fits. So for example, it might be someone disagreed with you at work. You know, oh, he thinks I'm stupid. You don't know he thinks he's stupid. He just had a different point of view and you are there making an assumption. Or it could be, you know, anything that's like, oh, this happened, that must mean that. So, oh, he shouted, he must not like me. Or I think it's fair to say most of us have been guilty of catastrophizing at one point in our life. So, you know, oh, it's a nightmare, this is never going to get fixed now. There's also kind of deletions, so where we're ignoring evidence or we're overlooking information when we're making our conclusions. So it might be, you know, oh, it's wrong of me to want money. Well, who says it's wrong of you to want money? Like where does that come from? But sometimes that could be a really deeply held belief that we don't know where it's come from. Or comparisons like, oh, she's better than me, but just really kind of not being clear on what they're better at and just making it about just overlooking a lot of information when you come to that conclusion. Or, you know, oh, I've got to put up with it, there's no other option. Perhaps it's kind of overlooking or deleting the possibility that there are other ways. And then there are generalizations, which, you know, this is where we're taking one piece of evidence or one piece of information and then we're applying that broad brushstroke to lots of other situations. So, oh, I always get things wrong. So anything that's an always or a never, watch out for those. Anything that's a should or a shouldn't or a must not, look out for those as well. Oh, I shouldn't ever shout. You know, maybe sometimes it's okay to shout. You know, if you need someone to stay safe or you need to offload, but there's lots of shoulds and shouldn'ts that play into this negative self-talk as well. Or kind of limiting your possibility. So yeah, oh, I can't do this. So there's lots of different ways that we distort information to come to these conclusions and then tell ourselves these things and talk to ourselves in these ways. But knowing that our thoughts are fallible can help us kind of start to see the chinks in their armor, so to speak. So to kind of start to dismantle and crack the logic that they've got and that hold that they've got over us. So we need to start to undermine that undermining thought. So how do we do that? So the first thing I would say is it helps to connect with your desire of why you want to change that thing that you're saying to yourself, because if we're getting real for a second, it takes effort and it needs repetition. And this, you know, it's familiar. It's been sometimes a lifelong familiar phrase that you've been saying to yourself, and you'll need to build up that muscle and practice. So in order to kind of keep that motivation, it can be really helpful to first just connect with, how is it causing you a problem? You know, if you tell yourself you're silly or stupid at work, how is that causing a problem for you? If you tell yourself you're not doing enough, what does that cause to happen? How does that make you feel? What would change if you had a different thought? And then once you've kind of understood, yeah, I see what would change, I know why I want to change this, then it's a case of kind of getting to know your enemy. So understanding that thing that you're telling yourself, where are the edges of it? Where does it start and stop? Do you feel that Is it in a particular type of meeting where you feel a certain way? Is it on a day that's particularly busy with lots of scheduled family stuff that you feel that you're not doing enough? Like when does it come up for you? Because the more you can get specific about the situation and the environment and the conditions that make you think this and make you say these kind of things to yourself, the more ammunition you'll have for picking it apart, which is what we want to do next. So then we kind of want to find all of the ways that that phrase or that thought is wrong, even slightly, even if there's some truth in it. Which bits aren't true? So if you kind of look at this bit as becoming your own defense lawyer, you've got an internal attack on yourself and you need to find the counter evidence and the counter arguments to kick that out of court. And even just doing that can take the sting out of it. Just kind of starting to dismantle, oh, okay, this thing that I have assumed, this thing that I've been saying to myself over and over again, maybe that's not right. But it's not enough just to try and get rid of it. What we really want to do, this is our 4th step, is swap that and upgrade that thought for something more positive. So swapping the irritating gnats for a warm, loving pet. This is my media hangover, is can't get away with a presentation without an acronym. But a gnat being a negative automatic thought. So as we've seen, a lot of our negative thoughts especially are automatic, often subconscious. And what we want to do is upgrade those for a more positive, empowering thought. So if we were to go back to that step where we start to befriend that negative self-talk as kind of a toxic friend or a frenemy, someone who's trying to keep us safe, but they've got their own interests, their own motivations, and they're not being kind to us in the way that they're trying to do that. This step to counter that is about nurturing your inner best friend, your inner cheerleader, kind of finding that voice that stands up to the toxic frenemy and, you know, tells you something much better, supportive, encouraging. So when you're kind of looking for what your counter kind of positive and empowering thought is going to be, the best advice here is just to make sure that it's something that feels realistic, something that feels objective, something that feels constructive, because it needs to feel believable to you. Otherwise, you're just going to reject it and it's going to feel really difficult to take on board. I think this is often why kind of affirmation culture and manifesting can be quite difficult for a lot of people, because, you know, if you're saying to yourself, I'm rich and successful, but you don't feel that way, it's quite hard to take it on board. But if you were to say something like, I'm ambitious and hardworking, those might feel like qualities that are more true for you, and you can see how that could support you in getting to where you wanted to be. So once you've kind of found your positive thought, then it's just a case of trying them on for size, practicing them out. I think if it's a case of, you know, a situation that you know comes up, it can be really helpful to mentally rehearse. So if it's kind of before you go on a date or before a certain meeting, think about, okay, if I know I always say this thing to myself, what would I prefer to be saying? When would I say that? Would I say it just before I leave the house? Would I say it before the meeting? And then mentally practice, and then in the moment just give it a go. And what I would say here as well is just be patient and kind with yourself. If that doesn't happen, that's also fine. Let's not give ourselves more sticks to beat ourselves with, right? I think it's about consistently trying to choose a more positive way to talk to ourselves. And where that doesn't work, to just think, okay, why didn't it work? Okay, I'll try again differently next time, and having some grace for yourself in the process. So here are some examples to kind of whet your appetite. So for example, instead of he thinks I'm stupid, perhaps it's conceding, okay, he can just disagree with me without thinking I'm stupid. He shouted at me, he must not like me. maybe you could think, well, yeah, there's several reasons why he might have shouted, and then almost challenging yourself to think of all the ways that are not you that might have made them shout. But it's a nightmare. I'll never get it fixed now. Now, this feels really difficult, but I've overcome difficult things before. You know, sometimes it's finding evidence from the past of, you know, of course you don't want to be there again now, but you have overcome it before, and kind of congratulating yourself and trusting yourself. You know, deletions. It's okay for me to want my money for myself and my family. So maybe it's a case of reframing a thought like that and going, well, I don't just want more money to be greedy. There's a reason why I want more money, and this is it. Or, you know, if it's a comparison thing, there's lots of different options here, but it could be I can learn from her strengths, or it might be noticing where you feel more comfortable than they do. And sometimes it's asking yourself a question. So instead of kind of, oh, I've got to put up with it, there's no other option, maybe it's saying to yourself, well, can I find a better option? And then in asking yourself that question, you'll be surprised how much it opens up the possibilities. You know, I got it wrong this time, but there's lots of times I've got it right. So sometimes it's just having compassion for ourselves, that in the moment, yeah, do you know what? I did get it wrong. I could have done better this time, but there's lots of other times I've got it right. I don't always react like that. There's certain situations that it just got the better of me, and next time I can choose to do differently. The past is in the past and I'm moving forward. Or it could be, I shouldn't ever shout. Well, I'd prefer not to shout, but nobody's perfect, right? Or, you know, having a bit more of a growth mindset. So instead of I can't do this, I haven't worked out how to do this yet. And yet is a really helpful word with things like this. If you chuck the word yet on the end of sentences like this, it really opens up your mind to think, okay, I haven't worked out how to do this, but I will get there. So now it's your turn. I would love for you all to take a little moment now and just think, all of those things you've been saying to yourself today, how might you flip those? How might you upgrade those to something that feels more positive and empowering, but still realistic and objective? So let's think. And I'll give you a moment because it can be harder.
It really is harder, isn't it? You know, like just as I'm there sort of like pausing to think, my brain's like, but she really got me cross. She wasn't listening. I'm like, no, what could you have done differently? I don't want to do anything different. You know what I mean? It's funny, isn't it? The negative, and then you're trying to think a bit more positive, and then I feel like the negative thoughts or some other negative thought regarding the situation pops in, and that's quite hard to sort of stop it popping back and forth, isn't it?
100%. And I think this is part of it, that it's a muscle that we need to build up, and it genuinely does. I think no one is ever going to be immune to this. That's human nature. And I think part of this is just having some compassion for ourselves, but trying to be consistent in saying a better thing. And it's not necessarily about what would you do differently, but say in that moment, if you were saying, I could have done better. How would it sit with you to have said, I did my best in that moment?
Yeah, that's definitely.
Like, do you feel that you did your best? Because I think sometimes we just get pushed.
Sometimes, I definitely was pushed.
They just press our buttons.
Before, and then I just got pushed too far. There's a couple of lovely ones in the chat, as in, it is difficult to change our mindset when it has been acting in a particular way for years. That's what we were just talking about, wasn't it, as well? But instead of I'm not coping, I'm coping really well, but things are hard.
Yes. I love
That's
that.
a really good one, isn't
That's
it? I'm
brilliant.
coping really well, but things are hard.
Yes.
Or another one, some days are really hard. You can't change that, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. Some days are really hard.
They
Yeah,
are.
still carrying on.
Absolutely. Oh, I love this one. Instead of I'm not enough, I'm learning and adapting each day and getting better at it.
Yes.
Oh, I need to do a little heart for that. That was love. Instead of I hate this, I'm not enjoying this at the moment, but I might improve. That's brilliant.
Yes, at the moment.
Oh,
That's really nice.
now.
I'm
Brilliant
not
community.
enjoying
Love
this
it.
at the moment,
I'm not enjoying this at the moment, but I might improve.
but I might improve. I love that. I love
I
that.
love that, Rachel. That's amazing.
Yeah, the openness and the opportunity and just the, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's acknowledging the, seeing the difference. Yeah.
There's another one as well about what if. So what if sometimes doesn't mean like, if you know, when you're saying like, oh, I'm really great, I'm fabulous, it's like what if. So what if I can be wonderful? I think that might be easier for some of us to swallow.
Yeah.
Rather, I'm just fabulous and amazing. Because
Yeah.
sometimes it isn't it? Because I think it's a bit like what you were saying. It's like, oh, I want to manifest and be rich, and one of my problems to go in, that's going to be amazing. But it just doesn't happen like that sometimes, does it?
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes good questions to ask ourselves is like, you know, what's the worst case scenario? What are we afraid of? Also, what's the best case scenario? And I think that's a really nice kind of skew on that, of kind of thinking, yeah, but what if, opening up your mind to the possibility and thinking, yeah,
That's
even
right.
if I don't feel like that now,
What if I could?
Yeah.
Oh, this is a lovely one. My son told me today, don't worry, Mum, practice makes perfect.
Oh, love it.
Oh.
Oh, I'm gonna add mine on. Growing old gracefully. There you go.
Yeah. I love it.
I look tired. I've got a 20-month-old that only decides to sleep sometimes. Yeah. Or I could add, I've got lots of makeup in my makeup bag, and that's my best friend. Yeah. I love these. And I mean, if this is the first time for a lot of you in even trying to do that's quite a leap. Like, congratulate yourself for you've gone from here to here in like 40 minutes. And I put you on the spot and said, right, what would you say instead? So if you just think the more practice and cultivating of this happen, the easier it does get. And sometimes it's conceding the thing that is hard, but then just adding that bit onto it, like, yet I'm still carrying on, or I'm getting better each day, or but I might improve.
This is a really lovely one. This was my grandmother's favourite. This shall pass too.
Yes.
Shall pass too. My grandmother used to say that all the time. This will pass.
I love that. I love that one as well. Yeah, that's one I use with myself. Yeah. Oh, love it. You should all be very pleased with yourselves for that. So it's possible to upgrade our thoughts, but there's one final step. Because of this, the brain is like Velcro for negative experiences, but Teflon for positive ones. So we need to mind that gap. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, we have a negativity bias as humans, meaning that we are wired to pay more attention to that negative information. And this has actually been quantified by the clever scientists as a 3-to-1 ratio. So we need 3 positive thoughts, feelings, or experiences to counteract 1 negative. But change is possible because, you know, I mean, my knowledge of neuroplasticity is this much, but it's possible for us to rewire our brains if we pay more attention to the positives. And with consistency and repetition, we can start to cultivate you having more positive thoughts and choosing that way more often. So I had a really lovely analogy for this, actually, very timely, because I heard it just at the end of last week on a podcast called Best Friend Therapy. If anyone knows of that podcast, it's really good. And yeah, the therapist on that was talking about, if you imagine your mind as like an open field, when you're trying to cross that field, you would follow the path that is the most worn down, where the grass has been trampled, the reeds have been pushed back. But that path might be something that actually is a negative path, or it isn't serving you well. And you can decide, you know what, I'm going to choose a different path, go back to the beginning, and then try and forge a different path. But in doing that, the first few times you do that, it's going to take effort. It's going to be slower going. It's going to, sometimes you might go, oh, sod it, and give up and just carry back on the path that has been a bit more well-worn, right? But the more that we consciously try and travel that new, more positive path, over time, the old path will become overgrown and we'll start to use the more positive path. And effectively, it was just a really lovely analogy for rebuilding our neural pathways, and to kind of say, you know, it's going to be quite conscious at the start, and it's going to take a lot of repetition and just trying to remember to go back to the beginning of that path and to choose that different way. But the more you do it, the more you'll be cultivating that different pathway. And, you know, it doesn't always have to be super relatable. We have to, in terms of like, oh, if you're thinking one negative thing, if we just have a much more positive kind of a gratitude practice, for example, can be really helpful for this, because effectively we're just training our brains to look for more positive and heartwarming things. And it's, if you ever did an exercise of, right, challenge yourself to write down 3 things that you're grateful for, and you'd be able to write that down. And then if I said, right, now make it 5, now make it 10, now make it 20, the more you do that, the more you'll start finding tiny little things in your day that actually you are grateful for. That, oh, the shower wasn't cold this morning, or you know, that extra cup of tea was nice, or I got that free coffee from someone, or the baby slept through last night, or I had a nice hug from a friend, or, you know, it literally, the sun shone for 5 minutes before it started raining. The more that we train ourselves to look for the positives, we're ultimately serving this bigger purpose of rewiring our brain and trying to counteract that balance. And I think also knowing this ratio can be quite helpful. Like if I was to challenge you on those days where, you know, had one negative bit of feedback at work, for example, or one thing happened, or, you know, the start of your day was just rubbish, have this ratio in your mind and think, right, I'm going to try and think of 3 positive things now to try and balance that out, and bring your awareness back to the positives. Maybe it's kind of, oh, he said that one thing that really got to me, but I've laughed at this WhatsApp today. Someone else said that they really liked my lipstick on the bus, and then something else happened. And the more that you challenge yourself to do that, the more that you're cultivating this overall more positive and empowering inner talk for yourself. So there we have it. So thank you. We've seen that our negative self-talk can have a real impact on us, but if you can start to follow these steps, so noticing when it's happening, and also what you're saying to yourself and getting really clear on that, acknowledging it with some compassionate curiosity, so befriending it, understanding that it's trying to keep you safe, but just in a really backwards, kind of mean, twisted way, and then start to kind of slam it with the counter evidence. Don't take it as a given. Challenge yourself to look for all the ways that it's wrong, and then swap it for a more positive and empowering thought, and remembering to try and triple down on the positives as well. So one last thing I would just love to say is that it's really important that if any of this is ever getting too much, and you find that your inner monologue is just having too much of an impact, you know, affecting your mood or getting overwhelmed, then please seek support. You know, I'm a coach, I'm not a counsellor or a therapist, and there's lots we can do in terms of helping people reframe their thinking and their negative beliefs, but yeah, I think there's only so far that we can go, and I would just love to make sure that you're all looking after yourselves as you need to. So yeah, that's me. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I don't know how we're doing for time. We've got another 5-10 minutes
left. Kind of 5-10 minutes or so.
Anyone wanted to share? I'll come off sharing that and see, have a look at this chat box as well.
Oh, thank you so much. That was so helpful.
Oh, that's lovely.
Some nice comments so far.
This too shall pass. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's really good, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just a quick question as well, just to draw back in to try and start with these positives and to gain this. So would you try and do that even just to start off, like on one thing daily when something negative happens, or like one of those thoughts, or would you just maybe start slowly, like every couple of days, every week? Is there sort of like a set pattern, or a way that you could maybe start? Because like you mentioned, and like for some of us, it was really hard to find a positive in that one, like you say, on the spot, but still, nevertheless, that's quite a fear factor to think, gosh, I couldn't even think of a way I could make that better, or think about that to be better. So
it's a really good question. And I think with anything that feels too big and overwhelming, the best thing to do is to chunk it down to the absolute smallest thing that you could do. So, for example, if maybe it's just saying, if there's one thought or one time of day that you know that you're particularly mean to yourself, I don't know, maybe it's the end of the day, or the school run, or whatever it is, just say to yourself, each school run this week, if I shout, this is what I'm going to say to myself, and then just practice that moment. And I think it's one of those things that kind of snowballs, and it's more, it helps to have a focus on a moment that you can practice, because like you say, otherwise it can just get away from us. But then the more you start doing it, what you'll notice is you'll catch yourself more of, oh God, I was really mean to myself after that meeting when I fluffed up that slide, or I did this, or I didn't reply to that email quick enough, or whatever the thing is. And then just, even at first, just challenge yourself to notice when you do it. Just do step one and then see how that goes. And then start smallest, one phrase, and then let that be your mantra for a while and see how that goes. I think that would be my advice.
Thank you, Kate. Someone else has said, thank you for these tips. This session was very helpful and perfectly timed.
Oh, good. Yeah, music to my ears. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to say a big thank you. Oh, there's a lot more thank yous popping up now. You could probably see them, Kate. I'd like to say a really big thank you, Kate, to you as well. Obviously, where you're just off maternity. So thank you for giving the time for the Frola community. It's very much appreciated. And sorry, just because the chat popped up, then it caught my attention.
Yeah, no, same.
I'm like that. No. But honestly, thank you so very much for your time and all your wonderful positivity. And every little bit helps, doesn't it? It just allows us to think of things differently and to be more kind to ourselves, let alone for anything else. A lot of people have said thank you again. We'll definitely be putting this into practice.
Yes, go on, Kate.
And then someone then has always, I've already mastered a degree with negative self-talk, and it's now time for a change. And they're going to definitely kick ass. Love that.
Yes.
Yes, kick ass.
Love it.
Get rid of that bullshit. We're allowed to swear. We're all adults. Brilliant. Love it. That's a positive. See, I turned it
bullshit button. Yeah.
Yeah, keep pressing it, and no more for that. Thank you, Kate. It's been very helpful and therapeutic. It's been fabulous. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you for all being gentle with me, likewise, and for not having the tumbleweed moments in our little thought mood boards. I was very appreciative that you're all open and shared, and absolutely loved those positive, empowering thoughts at the end. So
I think it just helps, though, doesn't it? It's what's lovely about a community, is that we're all here to help each other, and a lot of us, we've become single parents in many a way, but we all just get it.
Yeah.
And I think that the more we can help each other out. Kate, it was perfect. I think we'll have to end on that one.
Oh,
Carolina, You are perfect.
You are perfect, and you should write that down and put it on your mirror.
Yeah, put it on your mirror and just like big capital letters, colourful ones as well.
Yeah.
But thank you all very, very much. Thanks again to Kate, and thank you all for joining us. And if you want to look back on this or any of Kate's social media handles and an email, all of that was on the first slide. So that will be then relative to the YouTube channel for Frollo. So good evening to you all, and thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, Kate. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Bye all.
See ya.